All right. Hey guys, Jeff Kamke here with Wealth Energetics. I'm excited about this week's podcast interview with Katie Corbin. See, I went to the old name.
Yeah.
She's been a business coach of mine about a year and a half ago. I've known of her for about 10 years through a business coach that we used to be with. And my time with her has been amazing. I know one of the big things that I gained from my time with her was really finding my voice in what's on my heart and what I'm passionate about and delivering that to other people. And I value that gain from our time together, Katie, amongst other things and a lot of other attributes that I gained from that. But that was like the thing that stood out from our time together. So I love that. You are the business alchemist. I know your background is in acupuncture and you do a lot of business coaching, and you have a wealth of knowledge and experience that I'm really excited to dive into today. And we're just going to see what comes up. I think we're going to talk about success. We're probably going to talk about health. We're probably going to talk about money. We're probably going to talk about all that good stuff and share some good nuggets, some information, some tips, our experiences, and hopefully it'll be a good time. So thanks for joining me today, Katie.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff.
That's awesome. All right. So I love the name Business Alchemist. So share with me a little bit about like what you're up to now. I know you do coaching, but what else do you do? What are some of the passions that you have around what you're up to right now?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. I mean, I know you know my story, but obviously the listeners don't know my story. So I actually started in alternative medicine and healing, basically. And eventually I created my own practice. And then really how I got into business coaching and mentoring other people was people started asking me, what are you doing and to be successful in your practice? And it actually sparked me to be like, well, what am I doing? Like, and how can I teach this to other people, not only in a brick and mortar setting, but also in a virtual setting? Because we actually have obviously we have the ability to be in a virtual setting in this day and age, right? We didn't used to be able to do that, but now with the power of the internet and the power of our voice, we can actually reach all over the world, which is really awesome. So when I actually first started business coaching, I almost felt like a little bit of an imposter. Like, how am I going to do this, and how am I going to help people do what I did? It's sort of like reinventing the wheel. But when I got to, I guess, the word of like the business alchemist, it's almost like the connection between magic and strategy, and magic and
Love that.
business. And it actually like really rang true for me. Like I can't leave out one or the other. Like there's no strategy without magic, and there's no magic without strategy. So that's kind of how I came into what I'm doing now, and really coaching people. And I don't always love that word, mentoring people, advising people. Coaching can get a little cliche sometimes, too, as well. It can be a hot topic or a hot word nowadays too, as well. But allowing people to come into fruition of them in their business. So allowing them to find their voice, their own message. What are they speaking to the world? Almost their original work around what they're doing, because somebody could be doing the same thing as you, but it's going to be heard in a different way, and people are going to resonate it with in a different way. And I feel like it's important in the work that we do in the world, and sort of going into our own destiny, that we make that mark on the world, and we're able to communicate that in the way that we want to, so people can hear us and say, oh, I want to work with that person.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I love that holistic nature of you can't separate aspects of yourself, aspects of who you are, what you're here to do. It's all encompassing. And I know, as we were talking before we went live, some of the branding that I've done and the name that I came up, Wealth Energetics, is exactly like your business alchemist. Like you can't separate these things of life. It's my perspective on it. I'll see what your perspective on it. I know a few mentors have shared these points and they really resonated deep with me of like when we were incarnated here, however you want to say that, born here, like you have a purpose, like you were created for a reason and a purpose, and you have gifts and things that you were designed for, that only you have the ability to do what you were called to do and the way you're called to do it. It's only for you, and that comes through in what you're doing, and it affects all areas of life. One of the things that I see so often is, like in medicine, we have the ear, nose, and throat doctor, we have the specialist for this little body part, and there's the missing elements of like, how does all that work together? And that happens in business, it happens with money, it happens all over map on these areas that we're missing the connection. And when we build that connection, when we see how these different areas of our life fit together, and when it's business and it's our relationships, our spouse, our children, our spiritual pursuits, our health, like all these things, when they get amplified together, it makes such a synergistic effect in how we show up in the world and what we can do in the world. And I see that the more I have learned of those principles, it just seems to show up more and more. So, what are your thoughts kind of around that whole topic?
Yeah, I agree with you. And the things like you can apply it in any area, right? You can apply it to health, you can apply it to business, you can apply it to wellness, you could apply it to finances, you could apply it to parenting, right? You can actually apply this in all areas. And the interesting part is as you accelerate in one area, it allows other things to also come with it, right? So it's like if you get better in your health in one area, a lot of times you feel better overall. They're not, nothing is disconnected, right? And we're also not disconnected from the universe. So no matter how, marketing and strategy people can get with it, if you're not speaking your work and you're not aligned with your work, then it's going to be hard for people to hear on the other side, or it might come off as fake, or you may feel out of integrity, or you may, sort of burn out too as well. So I think it's important to take that sort of like bird's eye view and look at business and money and finances as a whole versus just one small piece of, oh, I need more marketing, or I need more leads, or I need a funnel, or I need these things, right? It's like if you look at it at a higher perspective, the root comes to like, what are you here to do, and what vehicle are you using to do that work in the world? And you can use multiple vehicles to be able to do that. It doesn't even have to be one. But if you're not aligned with your original work, it's going to be a lot harder for people to almost like receive what they're meant to receive from that work.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I love that. And I think, as I was thinking as you're saying that, of like we're in this time right now of into the new year, New Year's resolutions, and people I think jump into those things with like, I'm going to make this big change. And I'm curious, excuse me, your perspective and from your experience on making a change and getting to the point where you can find that voice and find who you are, and the cliche of finding your purpose, but there's really a lot of weight to that, and the necessity for people to find that. And there's so many people in today's world that are they're searching for that, they're eager for that, they're hungry for that, they don't know where to go, they don't know what to do, they hate their job, they hate their spouse, they hate their kids, they hate their life to some
Yeah.
degree. And hopefully the people that are listening to this aren't quite at that level, but guess
Yes.
what? Maybe you are. Maybe you have seasons. I have seasons like that in my life where things aren't going very good. And a lot of that stuff I might say for a period of time, like, I don't like any of this stuff. I hate what's going on.
Yeah.
So, from your perspective and your experience, what do you find are some of the key components to somebody finding their purpose and making a transformation in their life? And it's not like I'm going from I hate my life to like everything's perfect and I've got everything in my life that I want, but getting on that track, like finding that frequency that maybe has eluded them up to that point. Share some nuggets from your experience on like what you see as some powerful ways for people to find the purpose and get on track.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a good question too, as well. I almost see like it as refinement, almost like a dial, right? Where you start to dial in more, and it's almost like that concept of like improving a little bit every day, right? Like
Yeah,
finding your purpose a little bit deeper. It's not like 20 years ago, I didn't even know I was going to be a mentor in business. Like I didn't have that idea. I didn't even know what that was.
sure.
It's almost like the evolution of you, and then allowing yourself to evolve, because a lot of people don't allow themselves to change and evolve into the person they're meant to be. They're staying in the same career because they're afraid of like, change, or they're like, well, I'm already at this age, so I might as well just keep doing what I'm doing. And then you forget about your purpose, right? You forget about like what you're actually funneled here to do and to affect. Like even as a healer, starting in alternative medicine, I still do that work not with needles, but I still do that work for the alchemy part of the CEOs that I work with, right? So it's almost like it's conducive in nature and allowing yourself to also see yourself differently. Because sometimes we actually get scared of like, well, who am I going to be? What are people going to think of me when I change? I'm not the same person I was in high school, right? Like I'm sure you're not either, Jeff,
Nowhere near.
and it's like, that saying where people will be like, oh, you've changed. It's like, of course I have. Like, we're supposed to change. We're supposed to grow. We're supposed to evolve. And it's sort of weird when people don't change. Like you see somebody and you're like, wow, that person looks exactly the same, or they have the same personality. It's like almost like I feel like it's almost like the purpose inside of them is dying to some degree versus the people that evolve. Your purpose here on earth is somewhat to evolve to some degree. It is to come into fruition in you. It's not like you just come into, the earth plane and all of a sudden your purpose. You may have ideas and you may start to remember and go like, oh yeah, I was gifted like this as a child, or I had this ability. And then I see I didn't even really know my true intuitive sense until I started to get out into the world and utilize. I didn't really know that. And I was like, oh, I've had that gift since I was a kid. You're not going to know unless you allow yourself to come into fruition and evolve. So I would say like the biggest thing for me is allow yourself to evolve every single day. Right. Allow yourself to go into, even if we have bad days, we're still human. We would not be on this earth plane without, bad days and sometimes wishing that things would go away or wishing that something was different. Like you're going to have those emotions, but the majority of time you get back on that thing, right? You recommit to that space and then you're back on sort of like the evolution wagon instead of saying like, oh, I'm just going to evolve in one day and then it's all going to be over and I'm just going to be this enlightened being. I've never, that's not, not that I know of anyways. Even the most enlightened and wise people that I know are still evolving. They're still here. They're still, growing and finding their purpose at a deeper level. So I think that would be the biggest thing for me when I look at people and it's like allow yourself to grow with grace and allow yourself to evolve in your purpose as you grow, as you age, ultimately. And it's important to remember that instead of that all or nothing mentality where we're like, oh, okay, Jeff's on a higher vibration and I'm not. So I'm just going to stay on this lower vibration forever. It's like, no, like, how did Jeff get to that higher vibration? It's evolving every single day. So it's almost escaping that mind trap of that black or white thinking.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I've seen that in my own life because you read the books of like the quantum leap and you get into that type of mindset of like, I want to shortcut it. I want the hack. I
Right.
want to just get there now. And as you pointed out, my wife reminds me of this a lot of some of her mentors that talk about, if you just do 1% a day, that's 365% a year. So,
Yes.
you're 3.5xing every year if you just do 1% every day, and it's like, yeah, you don't have to make these big quantum leaps. And I know you and Andrea have talked about the quantum leap is the consistency every day. And when you
Yeah.
look back after a number of months or years, you can see the quantum leap that took place. And not that within that process, there aren't going to be big leaps forward. There certainly
Right.
can be. You can certainly do things that move the needle massively. And there's energy work and there's all kinds of different things. Sometimes having the right mentor that can just point out that one thing, it can, change a trajectory massively for somebody and get them going. I know for me in my life, it's been working on those things on a regular basis, but then how often do you get off track? And how quickly can you realize that and get back on track? For me in my life, it's been a lot of the awareness of that and realizing I can remember when I was real young, like I could be in a negative tailspin for I think weeks or months at a time. And then
Yes.
when I started learning of the principles of, dialing into your own intuitive abilities and your own emotional guidance system of how am I feeling and understanding like when I'm feeling off, what that's doing to my vibration and how I'm pushing away the things that I want to some degree by being in such a negative state for so long, and then realizing, okay, I can do these steps to get back on track, whatever those steps are, tapping or energy work or a mentor or a best friend or, playing a sport, whatever it is that changes that frequency. Like I know it was very profound in the beginning, like, oh my gosh, like no wonder I'm kind of miserable because I've been feeling crappy for like a month straight, and I didn't realize it, and I didn't
Yeah.
do anything about it because I didn't know what to do about it. So that's been a big thing for me, is making that realization and being able to get yourself back on track as quickly as possible. And I think the support systems around you make such a big difference. Having a spouse in alignment, and this is back to the holistic nature of things. I know, you've worked with both Beth and I, and any marriage, you've got conflicts. My mentor at my new agency, him and his wife have had conflicts, major things go on. And I think a lot of that gets not disclosed. People don't talk about the struggles. We always want to be forward facing on social media about how great everything is. And look at this goal I accomplished. And I made this money and my business is doing this. And nobody's happy to put on there like, yeah, me and my wife got in a major fight this week, like stuff's blown up. We don't want to go there, but knowing that that's inevitable, like you said, having grace of going through that. My wife reminds me all the time of have grace with yourself, grace with the
Yes.
situation, and just go with the flow and being okay with you're going to stumble, you're going to have off moments. That's part of the growth process. And it's what you do with those off moments that can help you accelerate to getting back on track and making a bigger leap forward after you get back on track. What's your experience been with some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like catching, like we're gonna sabotage. Like we're gonna go into self-sabotage. It's almost like the spiral of, oh my God, it's a bad day. And then what else is gonna happen? Or, like, oh, a lot of things are going bad. And it's like it's almost how quickly you can turn that around, right? That's almost alchemy. So it's like you can take a challenge and you turn metal into gold. You can take circumstances and actually turn them into opportunities. And when you can do that and see the circumstances, obviously there's tragic things and there's grieving process that we have to go through. We're not going to take something and spiritually bypass it, right? So but you can take like, oh my gosh, I did get really angry at that driver. I must be having a bad day and what's going on with me, and like that check in and go like almost like having grace around yourself. Like, oh yeah, I did have a hard week last week. Let me sort of decompress and then get back on that trajectory. The faster you can catch yourself in self-sabotage and the faster you can get yourself sort of out of that and go like, oh, look at me, I'm being funny, or I'm in fear, or I'm in these spaces, the quicker you can turn that around. And then you're not in that spiral for a month. And then, 30 days goes by. I'm like, what am I even doing? And like it's almost like a time warp when people start to get in sort of that state. And it's natural. It's not like anybody's gonna, I still do it, right? Even like you're saying, where I mean, social media obviously can be so fake where, there people are telling them like, oh, make sure you write your rags to riches story and tell everybody about how you went from zero to $1 million and just keep telling that story over and over and over again. And then you'll just attract people, right? It's like that's not the worst way of marketing, but it's also like what happened between then for those people. Right? Like what was the story between the zero and the million? Like how many times did you fall and how many times did you have to get up and how many times did you have a fight with your spouse, right? Like that's part of the journey. And if we can't, if we're reading all these stories about like just this person going from A to B and then there's no like what happened between, we can also get into that black or white thinking. Well, I'm not doing that. I'm still in the between. So what am I doing? Like almost like, am I a failure? If I'm not as
Right.
successful as that person. So we can get in a lot of it comparison, imposter, and that can actually spiral us into the sort of like I always call like the pit of shit, where we're spiraling downward and we're like we're sort of in that pit, right? And there's chaos ensuing. And like how early can you recognize that? And then how can you almost alchemize yourself out of that into the greatest opportunity? Because a lot of times the lowest lows actually lead to the highest highs. That's why you'll hear stories about people going bankrupt and then becoming a billionaire,
Right.
because they're able to alchemize in those spaces of lows in order to leap, right? That's almost like the quantum leap, but they've been doing it the whole time. They work on their mindset, they do the things, they've been in it for years, they have tons of
Mhm.
experience. Otherwise, you're like the lucky person, which is rare, that walks into a gas station and buys a lottery ticket,
Right.
right? And wins whatever money, but they usually end up losing it anyway. So if you don't actually hold that space, no matter what, right, you could actually end up making $1 million and completely losing it. So I always believe that it's important to sort of zoom out and look at that big picture. Like, am I doing something to improve myself every day? What am I working on this year? We were talking about, the January stuff. How many people go to the gym for 30 days and then they never go again the whole year? Like,
Right.
that's the mindset of sabotage,
Mhm.
right? And it's detrimental for our mind and our body and our soul, because if we see everything in that way, oh, I'm going to get in shape. Oh, I fell off the wagon 30 days and then they never go to the gym again. Like that is almost like a sabotage mindset. And oftentimes it leads to failure.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think so much of that type of energy with the New Year's resolution person, is it's always interesting to me because the way that they go about it, it's like they're not really in it. It's the fad thing to do. It's
Yeah,
it's the new
can
year,
be.
so we're gonna put this out there, we're gonna do it, and there's not the serious commitment. There's not that deeper connection behind becoming a better version of themselves. And I think some people don't have the belief in themselves that they can do it, or they don't have the right resources. They don't have their life set up around them to be able to be successful with it long term. And, I agree with what you're saying as far as it made me think of my story with going back in time and is some of the things that have happened in my life that haven't been very positive, that were some of the more impactful, traumatic things in my life that have gotten me to where I'm at now. And, the people that are going through a resolution stage right now, because the beginning of the year, there's this, like, I don't know how you want to draw it out, but, there's the pain to change or the pain to stay the same. And for some people, I've gone through 10 years of every January, I'm going to lose the weight, or I'm going to be in the best shape of my life, or I'm going to do this or that. And they never make it happen. And finally, in year 11, they get so pissed off because they've missed the last 10 years, and maybe they have lost weight in January, but then they gain it all back, and they don't make a fundamental core change with who they are at a core level to make those lifestyle changes permanent. It's just the dieting mentality of, I'm going to do this for a little while, get the result, and then go back to what wasn't working for me, what was creating the unhealthiness, the weight gain, the poor mood, the lack of motivation, the no desire to do anything with my life. Like, I'll get better in January, but then, the rest of the year, not stick with it. And I know from my standpoint, like the things that I went through as a child, I had acne really bad. And I can remember my mom telling me, God's got a plan for you, son. Something's going to come out of this. And, at the time you can't see it. And, for the person going through resolutions right now, they're maybe frustrated that they can't get over the hump. Like, you can make the decision to change at any point, but sometimes the pain is the best motivator to get you up and over. And I know for me, the things that I went through around acne all those years, like, it led me into a whole new world around natural healing and how cleanses and my diet could affect the outcome. And I mean, when I understood those things and changed them, acne for me healed up in a couple weeks. And I had been on all the drugs for like all of middle school and high school with virtually no permanent results. It would get better for a little time. And, for me, it was like, okay, that was a big pain, but it turned into a passion of mine. And then, we went through the accident several years ago that set us up financially. And then the pain from that led me into, like, there's got to be a better way to handle money than the traditional route. And so as you look back, you can be thankful for the things that you go through, the trials and the tribulations, and you have to be open to, seeing the gold in those things and realizing I can choose to let those circumstances continually beat me down. I can keep replaying how negative they were and how I feel and the result of it. And, you could be the victim, you can play that card, or you can choose to, like, look for the gold and find the lessons in those moments. As one of my mentors, Dr. Mortar, in bioenergetic work, he always talked about that. You got to find the lessons in the negative emotions and in the negative experiences you have in life. And if you can find those lessons, it can be such a transformational thing moving forward, because then you've up leveled your vibration, because now you're if you're here for a reason and on your path there's a trial or tribulation, and you find the gold nugget, like that's part of your purpose for being here is up leveling through what life throws at you and making the most of it, rising above it, and then finding that place in your heart to serve other people through that stuff. I think so many people, the things that they go through can be their ultimate gift that they can give to the world. But it's only there for those that are aware of that possibility or are guided to find that. And, it's a shame so many people can't find that. They're not aware of that. I can remember distinctly years ago when I was doing just primarily bioenergetic work. I was one of my long-term clients, he had invited a friend over. And this friend, I don't even remember the situation, but there was a lot of abuse going on. And we got into the dynamics of some of that before I was doing like a balancing session on her with some bioenergetics. And I remember asking her, like, have you ever looked for the gold in this situation? And I remember her eyes and her energy shifted so profoundly. And it was like she almost wanted to like punch me. I mean, she got like mad. Like, how in the world, Jeff, could you suggest that out of this horrible situation, there's anything good out of it? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to step out of the room for a few minutes. I want you to think about it. And when I come back, let's see if you think of anything. And when I came back, she was in tears because she started laying out all of the few things that she had thought of in those few moments about how positive the situation ultimately led. It wasn't positive during those abusive years, but the result of it, there was some wonderful things that happened with some children and like some charity work and all this kind of stuff that she's like, I've never thought of it. I didn't even know that was there until I opened my mind to the possibility of there being something positive around this terrible, horrible situation. And it was such a moving moment for me to take what at the time was just a principle. It's just a success principle. And then apply it in somebody's life and see the light bulb go on and see the transformation. I only saw that client that one time. I don't have any idea, where she's at this point and if it made a big impact on her or not, or made a change. But that was such a like profound moment for me to realize we have the power to change. And sometimes we just need people around us to help us see the light. And when we do, we can make the most of it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I always consider that almost like a transmutation process, right? Like it probably took her a long time. Like we don't want to spiritually bypass and just, look at the lesson and go like, oh, this horrible thing's happening. But then there's this lesson here. I'm just going to hang on to that. But like, it sounds like even with your clients, like that transmutation process, she went through the horrific thing of that. She felt the emotions within it.
Mm-hmm.
But she couldn't actually touch the space after she went through that process of like, what is this here to teach me? It's like it's building resilience ultimately. And how can we do that even in the small areas of life where you can have a fight with your spouse and then go like, get mad at each other and be like, you did this and you did that, and I'm mad at you and all these things. And then you actually can grow through those spaces after you sit down and go like, what's going on with you? What's going on with you? And then actually transmutation can happen in that space, and you actually can become stronger
Mm-hmm.
in that relationship because you're willing to go to those spaces with that person and find what's really going on, and then you can actually come out of that even better. And that's also, you can apply that to all areas. Health, I mean, I got into health too as well because I was sick as a kid, right? And the last thing, the best thing that the doctor did for me, which some of the things were life-saving, however, it was do this and live with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I can do that, but I'm also don't want to live with it for the rest of my life. So what else is there? Which led me to a chiropractor, which led me into alternative medicine. And the chiropractor was the only person that actually gave me tools to heal.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, and I could have said like, oh, I have this condition. I'm just gonna have it for the rest of my life. I could have chose that route, but instead asking a question and going like, what else is here? What is here for me? And is there anything else? Right. That the questions actually open up possibilities. Like even, what you said, you're asking a question to her. Have you ever looked at this as a different perspective? No, she hadn't. Right. And
Yeah.
she was able to shift. It's crazy though. This is also like the concept, even like we were talking about where, the consistency every day. But sometimes there's moments that you just shift and you can't go back almost to that old pattern because you're like, my perspective It's like putting on totally different lens of glasses. My perspective has changed. And then you almost can't go back to the old ways of believing maybe even what you believed 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or whatever it is. But it's an important concept, I feel like, in all areas of life, where you can shift in a moment. And also leading up to that shift is often required of the consistency, the showing up for yourself, the working through your stuff, the wanting, the desire, the belief. How do people actually get to the levels of um wealth that they desire, or their business or whatever it is like they believe and they continue to believe and they commit and they continue to recommit and they take risk and they continue to take risk, right? They could be variable risks. It's like, this is a really big risk, this is not so much, I'm going to take this risk, so it's like we take a risk every day when we walk out the door. Like, I could get in a car accident, I could choke on a chip. Like, so it's like,
Right.
your risk is so relative to how you feel through life. And if you want to get to those levels of performance, success, wealth, health, it requires you to be on board with the type of things like the wanting of the shifts, right? And also the consistency on doing that.
Yeah, I agree. One of the points you just made, I see so often, and it was part of my story as well, of like, if you don't look for it or you don't ask a different question, you won't find a different outcome. And I've seen that play out in my life and in so many people around me, clients, and just your sphere. That I know for us, when we had our accident and we were like massively upside down in debt from the accident, and it's like I've always seemed to inherently kind of do this, and I'm thankful for that, that I was kind of gifted with, of just,
Yeah.
looking outside the box. Like, I mean, when I had the acne and like you had with your health issues, like, is there a better alternative? Isn't there anything better out here? And it was funny, in the last week or so on some of my training courses for our new agency, they were talking a little bit about Dave Ramsey, and one of the friends of a trainer on the call, he was like, "Oh, I talk about Dave Ramsey and his baby steps of like being spoon fed like a baby. And if you'd like the big kids or the adult version of financial education, come consult with us," kind of a thing. And
Mm,
that kind of struck me, because it goes back to, are you asking questions or looking for solutions at the same level that you're at and assuming there can't be change? Are you being spoon fed what the people around you believe is possible around health, around business, around money? And are you taking that on, or are you going, no, I know there are people out there, I might even know them personally, that are achieving better health, or they've had a health issue and they've rose above it and they've used that as a catalyst to be in the best shape of their life, or they've had a really terrible marriage and they used that either to transform that marriage, or they got out of it and they found their ideal mate and did a lot of inner work to find that. And they you can go through that process if you ask higher level questions. One of the words I remember, I was hearing a talk at a weekend event years ago, and there was a guy that he used to be a pastor. He was going through seminary for like 7 years, and he realized, this isn't the path for me. And he got into
mm,
bioenergetic work, and he was doing a seminar talking about the biblical aspects of law of attraction and healing of the body and all this stuff. It was a really cool talk. But he talked about the Greek word metanoia, which means repent in biblical terms, which I know for me, it was always like, you're going this way towards sin. And so you need to repent and turn around and go back this way towards God. And he's like, that's not really the meaning. It's a deeper meaning, that it's seek higher. It's to have a transformative shift and not just staying on the same plane. It's seeking a higher vibration, going to a higher frequency, and finding more wisdom and a deeper meaning behind the things that you're going through. And I see it so much played out, where if you're not asking questions from a different perspective and being willing to entertain a different perspective, and we just assume we can't change our health, the body can't heal, the doctor told me it can't be fixed. I've been told that. After our accident, I had some issues with my spine that even my chiropractor told me would never be fixed. And
mm.
we did some bioenergetic work, and guess what? I've had zero problems with it ever since, because the body can heal. This, right? And
Yeah.
if we don't ever, and even when I heard that, and I think this is a key component, of when you hear something like that. So many people, if they're diagnosed with cancer and they're told you have 6 months to live, most people die in 6 months because they're programmed to die. Not because the disease just is so predictable in what it does, it's because of how you viewed the doctor and how that belief literally cements into who you are, into every cell of your body and your energetic imprint. And you have to play that out. And so you actually, it's called the nocebo effect. You have actually played out a program from somebody else. And we do that in everything. You can't make that much money. You'll never be a success. You can't have a happy marriage. You can't do this. You can't do that. If we take that on, then we repeat it. If we take that on and go, no, 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 I'm going to prove them wrong, or I know better, or I think I can figure out a better solution, then you can look for different answers. But if we take on other people's beliefs, it closes the door to the possibility of finding anything better. We won't be able to find an answer to our health solution. And, sometimes there's not, right? Sometimes it's too far gone or whatever, but the ability for the body to heal is so much beyond what especially society at large gives it the power to do. And I know you know this. I love that we have that in common about health because it spills over into every area of our life, just the principles alone and how we can make a change if we so desire. And it's just about our mindset on how we are affected by the things in our environment and what people tell us. And if we want to make the change, we have that power. I mean, really, we control our thoughts, whether we think we do or not. We control our thoughts, and we can change the frequency of what we're experiencing by changing the dial of our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like the space of possibilities. So that space of possibilities, it's almost like anything is possible in that space. And it's looking at it from a higher perspective, and it's looking at it at a higher trajectory, and it's going like, what else is possible here?
Mhm.
And from that space, oftentimes that's where opportunities or things can actually drop in if we come to, this is only what I think my life is supposed to be. There's no space. There's no space for possibilities. And that's true in business too, as well, where people will think, well, I only can make this much money, or I'll never get to, 500,000 or seven figures, or I can't get to a billion, whatever it is, right? You're not allowing yourself to go into that space of possibility due to fear, or what are people going to think if I say I want to go there and then I don't? And all these things can come into almost like make you prove yourself right.
Mhm.
Right. So words are potent, right? They're beliefs. They actually cast spells, right? Words are imprinted. And you also can say, if somebody says like their belief, like they're telling you their belief, you're like, no, thank you. That's your belief, not
Mhm.
mine. Right.
Yep,
And that's the same thing where you don't have to take on other people's limitations or their beliefs for their life. You can actually choose something different, right? If we're conscious and aware enough that we can choose something different. But I feel like when it comes to a lot of things, it's like, where are you choosing for your own self?
I agree. It reminds me of a training years ago. They were talking about, do you know who Ed Foreman is? He was a big personal development guy back, I think, in the 70s and 80s. And he was also, I think, a two-time senator, like the only person who's been a senator in two different states. And he owned a lot of different businesses. And like back in the 80s when there was like real high interest rates and, some of the recession going on. And he had told the story of like some of his business cohorts were like, how's your business? And, are you being affected? And are, sales down, profits down, whatever. And he's like, no, I just chose not to participate. And they're
Mm.
like, what do you mean you chose not to participate? And he's like, my business is doing great. Like it didn't affect me at all. And they couldn't understand how that was possible because you should succumb to the inflation and the high interest rates and people aren't buying and it's a recession. So you have to be affected by default. He's like, no, I just chose not to participate. So when
Mm.
you have that mindset, you can look for different things. You can find where everything is still flowing. And I saw just recently, this was pretty cool. You think about ways to, no matter what the outside circumstances are, you can still find a way to be prosperous or to make money even in a bad economy, right? I saw this thing on, I think it's probably Facebook, where it was a group of people. They bought like a studio out in LA, I think it was, and they might have even bought like parts of a private jet that had been dismantled, or somehow they brought in like pieces to emulate the inside of a private jet in this studio, and then they just rent the space out for influencers and for podcasters and for social media people to come in and do photo shoots, or do like you and I could go into that studio, Katie, and we could sit down and act like we're on a private jet having this podcast. And they rented the space out, and they were like booked out for 2 years. And I don't remember how much they had made, but I'm like, there's opportunity everywhere if we
Yes.
look for it, you know, and it goes
Yes.
back to what we're willing to close out of our mind or open our minds up to. And there's opportunities everywhere. There's the ability for us to succeed all over the place. And sometimes we just have to look at a situation differently, think outside the box. And I know those things can be so cliche, but it's so true. Like there's so many ways. I had a call earlier before we were on with some other life insurance agents doing what we do. And you know, we were going through some PowerPoints and sharing some ideas and things. And they're like, the thing I love about this, and you know, kind of applies to everything, is there's so many ways to, you know, share these ideas and communicate ideas. And it's like, yeah, there's no shortage of anything. We live in an abundant universe. There's ways to do everything. There's enough resources for everyone to flourish. We don't have to be worried about, well, this billionaire didn't pay enough taxes, so that's why my life is miserable today. And if he would just pay more in taxes, my life would improve. I would have more money in my pocket, instead of asking the question of like, wait a minute, how'd that billionaire get there? Maybe I should make some changes in my life to, you know, think differently, do differently, act differently, surround myself with different people so that I could increase my earning potential. Like we don't ever think about that. It's sometimes very perplexing, you know?
Yeah, and even like the question of like, how do I be that billionaire instead of like making them the enemy? You know,
Right.
it just it is wild how you can get into the constructs of you know, sort of being there is no space for me. There is no possibility. Well, that's a choice. That's your way of that you're thinking in that moment. And there's so many the interesting part to me too is like 100 years ago, there wasn't like the ability to see, you almost like had to know somebody or find a book or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's so much opportunity now that you could literally at the click of your hand find an opportunity on the internet to make money, right? And sometimes it's even like some people can get into information overload and maybe there's too many opportunities, like which one do I pick and how do I filter through these opportunities and which one is right for me. But I do find that if if you're in that space, you're going to get more of that.
Hmm.
Right. You're going to get more of that space that you're in. And if you want to, you know, some people are fine in that space, they're comfortable there. But if you're not, and you have decided to go outside and have more health and have more wealth and better yourself and have a better relationship, there are so many opportunities out there right now that you can choose to do that, to make more money, to get more clear on your work or your message or you know your finances or your IQ, your financial IQ. Like how many people can go on the internet and go like, how do I up my financial literacy? Right. And then even like asking that question could lead to somebody like, you know, they ask the question and then somebody knows you down the line, Jeff, and they're like, okay, like then they find you, you know, but the asking the question is going to allow them to get to that space. But if you don't ask that and you're not looking for it and you're not in the space of even, it's not even like, it's like the space of like, what is possible here? You don't know, need to know the possibility. You just have to be open to the space.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, the ability for that stuff to come in is ultimately up to you, whether you're pushing it away or allowing it in. And, you know, I know there's a lot of spiritual ways to describe all that stuff, but I mean, it's so true that the fact of what you want is there. And sometimes the negative emotions we feel because it's not in our experience is just the separation between it where it's at and us where we're at. And we have to make those changes so that we eliminate what's in between us. And sometimes, you know, it's not what we think that's in between us. It's maybe not always, you know, I think mental blocks and subconscious blocks get thrown around a lot. You hear that seems like by a lot of the different coaches and stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's a piece of it. It can be a
It's a
piece of it,
piece.
you
It's
know,
not all
but
of it
it's
though.
not all of it. Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think back to some of the stuff we've been talking about today. It reminds me of one of my mentors in the bioenergetic work, Dr. Mortar. He always talked about law of attraction. And you talked about law of attraction being cyclical, and like you
Yes.
have what you want up here where you're going, and I know in my life I can totally see this, and I'm interested to see if you see it as well this way. You know, the things that you're going for, your aspirations, and sometimes you get things really clicking, everything's really falling in line, and you're like up at the top of the cycle, and you're like advancing yourself, you know, more money's coming in, or you find your mate, or your kids are, you know, flourishing, or whatever it is that's like really clicking, really you're tapped into the flow. And then, you know, period of time passes, and then, you know, life happens or something happens, you fall and break your arm, or your kids struggle in school, or you know, you lose a sale or something like that, you know, and then you're
Yeah.
kind of on the downward side. And then if you don't catch it in time, which we've all been there, and you kind of bottom out, and bottoming out is like the lowest frequencies that you will go back to. And you know, whether this cycle is a week, a month, a year, a 10-year cycle, you know, it's different for everybody, and it varies obviously as we go through life. But the high points are where we're trying to advance to, and then the lowest points in what we're attracting is still just a frequency. And if we are working on clearing up the low points and always working to go to new higher points as we go through the cycle, we can be going upwards in that cycle and not just staying in the cycle. So it's so easy to stay in the cycle. And I peak out, things fall apart, I crash, I go to my mentor, or you know, I read the book, or I go to the seminar, and then I come back up, and we just stay right here. We're not moving through, we're not expanding through the process. And I've seen that play out so much in my life of like, oh yeah, I can like feel that I've reached that ceiling that we all talk about, that glass ceiling that's like it's a, you can't get all the way through it. You might peek your head up above it and you're like, oh, I've arrived. And then it's like, no, 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 no. You know, it goes back down, and you know, we go through that. But that's, I think, just part of the journey, and being able to, like we've talked about through this conversation, being able to detect where am I at in that cycle? Am I at a peak? And you know, what can I do to maintain that to the best of my ability? And then if we come to the other side of the cycle, acknowledging it, having the grace, if there's some clearing up of things that we need to do, handling of emotions or handling of patterns or habits or beliefs, like using that as the opportunity to do that when we're at that part of the cycle. And then know that, okay, we're not going to be here forever. We're going to come up the other side. We're going to get to greener grass, and things are going to start flowing again. And, you know, it's just going through that process is a normal function, as long as we don't stay at the bottom and keep attracting the things that we don't want and creating the things that we don't want. We just have to make that perspective shift and realize this is the process. The process isn't the destination. The process is going through the journey. And I know, you know, we've thrown out a lot of cliches, but they are so fundamentally true to the journey of life and accomplishing our goals and dreams and becoming the best version of ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of this is also biblical too, as well. So you can take the law of attraction, just like the man you were talking about, and make it biblical, right? It's in the Bible. It's seek and ye shall find, ask
Yeah.
and you shall be given, right? That is the whole sort of method of law of attraction too, as well. It goes back to biblical, to source, and to God, whatever religion it's connected to, right? You could probably say this maybe is across other religions too, as well. But if you go into the Christian religion, it's going to be that's those statements are ultimately true.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I agree. I find that you've touched on that. I've learned so much. I grew up in the church. I haven't really been a part of the church, you know, too much in my adult years, because there was a big disconnect. Because I found that going through and learning about personal development, law of attraction, and a lot of these principles, it's like those teachings expanded me more than some of the things that I learned in church. And it's amazing the amount of people that I've met, even our midwife that delivered our daughter a few years ago, you know, she had the exact same experience. You know, it was like, it took me so far, and now I needed something that was going to take me further. And there was just other teachings and other philosophies out there that expanded me, you know, to the point that I wanted to be at. And, you know, to me, I talked about this yesterday in the podcast that I did yesterday about the expansion of all this. And to me, it comes back to, you know, we have the goals, we have the dreams, we have our purpose, and it's about expanding. And when you can actually not just have that as a principle on paper, but actually feel the expansion, like take it to the body and feel how you are expanding. When you are in alignment with what you're here to do and you're affecting other people, I mean, just when you're around other like-minded people, you feel expanded, you feel bigger because your energy field is bigger. I mean, just doing this here in the 58 minutes we've been recording, together, it's like I feel bigger,
Yeah.
when you're working with clients and helping them in the way, like your client's going to expand energetically, you're going to expand energetically. And like, that's kind of the process, because at a bigger scale, quantum physics says that the universe is expanding, consciousness is
Yes.
expanding. And when we're doing our part and in alignment with all of those things, we're taking part in the expansion of all of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, it's so interesting too as well, even like how, philosophies can apply to it. And it's just
Mhm.
it's a cool topic. And it's truly amazing like what when you start to recognize and realize these things, how they affect us. Right. And then how we can actually utilize them for our benefit in this lifetime. How can it make us better? How can it make us to have the life that we ultimately want to live?
Yeah, totally. I love it. Well, cool. Well, I think we've had a good hour's conversation. I'm sure we could always keep going, but I think we've laid out some really powerful stuff. So share with us a little bit about, different offerings that you have, how if somebody resonates with what you bring to the table, Katie, how they can connect with you, follow you, get into some of your programs and offerings. Share with us some of that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to connect with me is just on Facebook. That's probably the one that I'm most present on. So just find me at Katie Corbin, and then you can find me on my website with my offerings at katiecorbin.com.
Awesome. All right. And we'll put those links with the video. So any of you guys want to check her out. She's awesome. She was one of our coaches for what, about a year, I guess, Katie. I think we were
Yeah, a
with
little
you for
over.
about a
Yep.
year. Had a great experience with a lot of the benefits that we gained on just our inner growth and the marketing side and finding the voice. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it was a great time. So definitely check her out if you're looking for somebody to help you get to the next level. She's well versed and well qualified to help you get there. She's got a lot of fantastic knowledge and experience to help you get to a new level. So thank you for joining me today, Katie.
Thank
It
you,
was
Jeff.
great to talk and go over some powerful principles. So until the next time, we'll catch you guys later. Take care.